What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today we're going to be talking about how to achieve a buttery smooth free drop in a folding knife. Maybe you've gone around and watched some videos, some silent videos of people flipping out their folding knives, and it's a knife that you are interested in, or you've already got it, and yours either isn't as smooth as the one you're watching, or perhaps you're just curious about, how to make it that smooth after you've got it. I was there too when I would buy a folding knife and expect it to be super smooth. And I would buy a new one, and I would go to, like the Manix 2 here, I would go to pull the actuator switch back or the lock switch back, and this would happen. Nothing. This one's pretty new. You got to give it a little bit of a whip. I've had it for a few days now, and it's getting better. Maybe you want to know how exactly you get that more smooth. And if you're like me, over the tons of knives that I've either bought or traded for, or acquired one way or another, and you try different techniques because you want it smooth immediately. Maybe you mess with the pivot a little bit. Maybe you put some oil in there, some rem oil, some break-free CLP, maybe you take the knife apart and you clean the washers or you polish the washers, and those are all great techniques, and they can work sometimes. But here's the issue with that. In the case of the Manix 2, almost all of those things require you to take the knife apart. And if you're familiar with Spyderco or a lot of other knife manufacturers or brands, it voids the warranty. They put red Loctite on these things because they don't want you to take the knife apart. And you take the knife apart to get the action smooth, and maybe you mess up a screw, or maybe you get it back together and it's smooth, but the blade's not as centered as it was, or the blade's wiggly. And then you're thinking, geez, I just spent $130, $150 on this knife, and I got it smooth, but now I'm kind of questioning if it's reliable, and it's better just not to mess with that. So I'm going to tell you over time what I noticed works best and what I would recommend for everybody. Let me first point out that knives like this are pretty expensive, and part of that expense goes towards the tolerances being very well designed. These tolerances are tight. I don't know if they're designed specifically to break in, but because they're tight, the parts all seem to sort of wear in unison. So here's Ricky's Manix 2 KnifeWorks exclusive in 52-100 steel, which is pretty cool. If you have not watched my video on this knife yet, definitely go check it out. This is an awesome knife. He's had this for about 2 to 3 weeks, and I think we talked about this. He took my advice and just used it and played with it and let it break in naturally. So here it is after 2.5 weeks. Beautiful. Now, that's not to say that mine doesn't fly out like that when you deploy it. Mine does too. It's getting there. But the action's definitely more smooth on this one, and it definitely has a smoother free drop. Both the deployment and the free drop have different reasons that they're smooth. The free drop, what's responsible for that, when you pull this actuator switch back, it's only the washers coming in contact with the blade. So it's just the washers in that case breaking in over time that are responsible for that free drop, because when you pull this back, that ball bearing doesn't contact the blade tang anymore. However, it being smooth here, and when I let go of the switch here, both times that bearing is rolling across this tang, and it's wearing its over time, deployment and retraction, it's wearing its own personal little track into that tang. So your knife is breaking in 2 different ways when you do that, naturally, just because of the way that it's designed. And it will, over a random amount of time, achieve this type of smoothness as long as there's nothing wrong with it or the knife isn't defective from the factory. And let me tell you, it's way more satisfying to get it to do that naturally, because first and foremost, after it gets that way, there's likely not going to be any blade play, and you didn't have to take the knife apart and mess with anything and question whether or not you put it back together to achieve that. Ricky's knife is super smooth now. Trying to get it to fall into the lock position. There we go. And he has no blade play whatsoever. And that's awesome, Over time, yeah, eventually he's going to get some blade play, but you can generally just tighten up the pivot screw at that point and you're good, without having to take anything apart. But that's to be expected, and that's way down the road. I'm talking about way, way, way down the road after you've used it for a long, long time. Yeah, my opinion is there, let the knife break in naturally. Let it just do its thing. If you want to sit on the couch and open it 50 to 100 times a day like I've been doing with my Manix 2, then you can do that, or you can just leave this in your pocket and pull it out once, twice, 3 times a day whenever you use it, more or less. Everybody's mileage varies, and it'll break in naturally. It might just take longer, but if you want it to break in properly and get this awesome smoothness that you see, then just let it break in. It's a lot more satisfying, and you can continue to love the knife and not have to question its structural integrity, since you didn't mess with it. So that's what I'm getting at there. But you can see here, mine takes a little bit of some hand holding to get it to do that. But most importantly, let's remember this: a smooth deployment and free fall has nothing to do with whether or not the knife is functional. This is more so just a satisfying thing. I can still pull this knife out of my pocket, deploy it, use it, retract it, and put it away with one hand. It's easier with Ricky's knife, but I can still do it, and that's still a good knife. So, if your knife is not as smooth as this, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your knife, but I can understand, believe me, being a knife guy, I can understand the desire to want your knife to do that. So, my advice is just be patient. The knife will break in over time. You don't need to add any lubricant from the factory generally, because they do lubricate them. Though, after a while you might want to add some, but that you use your judgment on that. The only time that you might have something wrong with your knife, or where you can determine that there's something wrong with your knife right out of the box, is if you hear like a grindy noise. Like right when let's say you just open this thing up and it's grinding. At that point, don't take it apart. Don't try to lubricate it. Just send it back in, especially if it's a Spyderco. Just send it back in, because you might have a defective knife, and then get one sent back to you that's been properly released from the factory, and then it's going to break in properly. The same thing goes for your Benchmade Axis locks. They work in a similar fashion. They have that Axis bar that's riding or rolling across the tang of the blade, and then when you pull these actuator switches back, the only thing that's contacting the blade is the washers at that point, which, when properly broken in, will also cause it to free fall. So that's what you're looking at there. Your frame locks, it can be kind of the same thing, but you've got to push that titanium lock face out of the way, and then it falls. But at that point, your thumb's in the way. That's a whole different discussion. But my point is that on a more premium knife, the tolerances are very good, and if the knife was released from the factory correctly, then you will eventually achieve that smooth, that really satisfying feeling of the blade deploying and retracting the way that you want it to. So that's pretty much it today, guys. I hope you found this video interesting, or hopefully helpful. And if you did, please leave a like. And also check out my other content, because I do have reviews on either cheap or inexpensive or expensive knives that I either do or don't like. And I've also got some reviews on some other EDC items that are not knives. So check that stuff out, and if you enjoy it, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications button, because there is definitely more to come. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.